Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to our very popular, not quite the witching hour special here on the Thomas Sheridan channel, where I interview people. And tonight I have a good friend of mine, Gerry O'Neill, who some of you should know from the blog post that I often share that he writes. And the reason why Gerry is here tonight, other than he's a very interesting man, is that he's actually released, published, said he's got his first book out called Unvaxed. And we're going to talk about the book, and it's quite exciting. Now, I haven't read the book myself yet. I haven't got it yet, but I do have some synopsis of it, and it's certainly, I have to say, Gerry, it's kind of surprising because all the times we've spoken and we know each other, we've never really had a spiritual conversation, and I get the impression
Mm,
that this is quite a spiritual book. But before we get into that, you mentioned something there about like so many people on the lead up to the scamdemic. Many of us were kind of having a life change, life review leading up to it, the relationships, the people we knew, the situations we were in, and we were kind of like taking stock and kind of getting rid of them. It was almost like we subconsciously knew what was coming, and now looking back on it now, it's kind of weird. But tell us about yourself, where you're from, and what brought you to the point right before, 2020.
yeah, yeah, quite it's quite interesting what you say there because I suppose there's two pivotal decisions kind of in my life have been the first one came in 2017, 18 when I quit drinking. And that kind of had a mass exodus out of my life in a similar kind of a way that COVID did. Um, but it was kind of, and that's where the book starts kind of maybe a month after that happened. And I suppose where I would say is that's where the journey kind of started for me, if you want to call it. You know, I, I'm careful about calling, loaded terminology because I know for myself, I don't, I write quite a lot. And it is my personal experience of spirituality, and I certainly don't sell it or that journey, my journey, to anybody else. Um, but I would say that would have began the trip for me. And then I suppose, in a sense, I was when COVID came, maybe 3 years later, I was ready for. I kind of, in a sense, was ready for the isolation of it because I'd kind of, in a way, and not through anybody's fault, just natural process kind of my life had kind of reduced down to kind of basics. And a lot of, the people I would have interacted with through a natural process of elimination were no longer in my life that much. And and I wasn't in there. So I was kind of ready for the isolation of COVID. I found it, personally speaking, 2020 in particular, a great release. I found freedom in the pandemic. As strange as that might sound, because I really got focused on writing. I wasn't writing on Substack at that point, but um, I found that I was working from home. I had a job in a factory. I was kind of a tech support worker down in Westport, and I was working from home. So I kind of was in I was in a bubble of my own, and I could just look at the world. I was looking at the world just through my vision of it, and without too much influence from day-to-day interactions with the normal run-of-the-mill people you'd meet in your job or family or any of that stuff. And I found it like in a lot of ways I enjoyed like it. Obviously, I was writing out critically about what was going on. I thought it was horrendous what the Irish government in particular were laying out. And um, but what I would say maybe in with the book is, and anyone that may be familiar with my writing, kind of I probably would have got quite well known at the end of 21, early 22 for my kind of current affairs writing and kind of what was going on. But there's always been this kind of parallel kind of journey in my writing where I might be writing two or three articles on, I did stuff on vaccine injured child in early 22, and then there'd be this personal strand where it's unrelated but kind of related. Um, and that was my personal journey because basically writing for me is a place I explore my own truth. So it's very important, no matter what's going on outside my life, how how inauthentic that might be when it comes to what I'm doing, putting pen to paper. It's kind of it's important that that is true for me in the moment. So you know, what I've learned over the last 4 years is it's been quite a journey, but that journey has taken me from the outside world, where I would have been focused maybe 90% on what's going on in the outside world. I'm trying to flip that number as to make, you know, 70, 80, 90% of my focus is what's going on within myself. And, I think we're all at the stage now where, if you're still angry after 4 years, I think you're in the wrong place. Do you know what I mean? There was a place for that anger. I find it kind of funny. And what might have taken me 3 weeks to discover, and I'd say you're probably the same, in 2020, it takes 10 minutes to figure out now, like, because, we're so used to the propaganda.
Yeah, I think I know quite a few people that had that kind of same monkish catalyst that you had caused by it. It's sort of like you're going in on a kind of a almost like a vision, an internal vision quest as a sort of like a counterbalance to the insanity of the world. I was absolutely furious in 2020. I mean, I was literally, you know, insurgency furious. When I think about it, I'd never thought that they would ever come and my rights would be taken away from me. And it had a very bad effect on me that I never thought of Ireland as being an evil country. And that's okay. I'm not angry about it anymore. Definitely not. But I still feel that Ireland is an evil country because there was certain behaviors in the early days by the establishment that made it seem that way. Was there any particular flashpoint threshold moment in the early part that like really said, "Oh, hold on a second, we're in a whole new territory now"?
Um, I, you know, Leo Varadkar's speech as early as like the March, that March 17th speech he gave, a week into it. That was a flare signal to me, like something something inauthentic ticked to me with that speech, as in how it was almost like Hollywood blockbuster drama. And from that point on,
Michael Douglas and Falling Down, that kind of a thing.
yeah, yeah. And
I watched that film so much. Yeah.
so I had, it wasn't that I was outraged, but it was like the way kind of I operated is the vibration of what he was saying didn't match. The words what he was saying didn't vibrate
Yeah.
at the same frequency to me, and it felt off. And so from that point, and like I was like, I won't lie, like the first month of it, I wasn't sure either way. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't as strong. Um, I wouldn't have recognized it as evil at the time, like say in the sense that you have. I've come to I've come to catch up on that over time, but I wasn't I was just ticking with stuff that felt inauthentic, and it just from that point on, it just seemed to be coming every day of the week. Like I had a different platform at the time, and I'd taken to examining the daily cases and all this propaganda that was on every twice a day on the news, and there was huge gaps in that even, and how that was being abused and misused, and it built from there. To be honest with you, the biggest problem I had with the whole 2 years was the vaccine passport. I just could not believe that, regardless of your opinions on vaccines, and mine are well known, yours are well known. But regardless of your opinions, that I genuinely thought, you know, the vaccinated population will not go for this, and yet they did. And that's when I went kind of nuclear and set up a Substack. And I think it was the end of September of 2021 that's when I kind of got, I said, went kind of public on, like, went public at that. And that's when kind of I would have come into contact with a lot of people like yourself, John Waters, Louise Rosengrave, Ashley, and like back in the, late 2021, 22, there wasn't that many people talking and there wasn't that many people writing. So um that's, they would have been the big trigger points for me. And I wouldn't have I don't like, in one sense I don't consider myself a radical, but in another sense I'm probably very radical in that, if we take it to today, I don't view I think Ireland needs to be completely reimagined as a country, and every single government department needs to be kind of taken down brick by brick and totally reimagined over the next 20 years. What I'm seeing, and I don't take much interest in it anymore, but anything I'm seeing kind of from the resistance side, it's just kind of tinkering around the edge, it's tinkering around the edges for me. That, good luck to them.
I feel the same way. I don't do much political talks or events or anything like that anymore. Other than favors the people, but I've actually come to the conclusion we need a second republic, like happened in France. We literally need to start again. Uh, how we do that, I don't know. It's just how I feel. I think in terms of like yourself at the very beginning, I went through about 2 weeks of like, have they actually done it this time? In a kind of a 28 days later Andromeda strain thing, that they were messing about with biological weapons and one escaped. And it's, I think that's a very rational assumption to consider the kind of psychopaths who run this world. If a mistake happened, it could really happen. Then I think the part where I discovered, like when I had there's a banality there. I totally agree with that. There was a banality there that didn't match up with the reality that what they were telling us. And I remember at one point it came out, Sweden didn't have a lockdown. And I remember Aidan Killian went over there and did a video of it in Stockholm. Well, we were all literally prisoners. He was in Stockholm showing everything was open and life was normal. And then it turns out later that the Irish government, and I still can't believe this, were actually sending spies to Sweden to set up a kind of a Mossad type a big pharma type Mossad operation in Scandinavia, to write letters to the Swedish and other Scandinavian media, make phone calls, telling them that they're all stupid and they're going to all die of COVID because they haven't locked down. And I was like, that's not the Ireland I grew up in. That's not the country I grew up in. Well, that I did not. That's like something that was like MI5 CIA type carry on, all to for the benefit of keeping the Irish establishment looking amazing. That kind of a thing. Like, look, aren't we amazing protecting you? And unfortunately, so many of the people believed it. Okay, then you mentioned something about where I think I even did it myself, is that you started to go on a journey, and inevitably these things are as internal as they are external,
Mm.
visiting the the beautiful parts of this island, which is impossibly beautiful, and much of this island is. Tell us about that.
Well, I suppose it's when I went to kind of put this book together, I kind of went over my older writing, and it fell into four chunks really. Like, there's four parts to the book: Saoirse, Bridget, Shadowlands, and the Green Mile. And like the fourth section, these were all very kind of real. When I put it together, I says, "Oh, there was a journey there." I was like, most of this writing has been, it's an episodic kind of memoir, so it's written. Each chapter is written in the time that it happened, in the voice that it happened in. And um, what I discovered is like I'd forgotten some of the stuff that I'd kind of done. I'd ran an event down in Doolin 4 weeks after the lockdowns finished to get people together because at that point we didn't know how long the country would be open for. And there was bits about my own family, and there was this, there was bits about my own family that I'd written about in 2022 who were vaccinated. And when I went back, and like they all helped me with that with that event. So it was very much a coming together of people down in Doolin in I think it was the first weekend in March in 2022. And there was just this explosion of energy at that event. It was on over a weekend, and it was a mixture of grief, relief, joy, anger. It was all in the mix.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think the first woman that spoke was a poet, and she just wrote. She was talking about censorship, and after she finished speaking, just one person after another just stood up and started telling their story of the hurt from that was nothing to do with what the woman I was speaking about, but it was just these confessions of I'll never forget there was a middle-aged woman there, and it's in the book, and she just stood up and she was broken-hearted that the relationship with her brother had broken down because they'd never had a row in their life until this thing happened. And it completely wrecked them. And it was just like this kind of mass. It was like I've been to AA meetings, and it was like an AA meeting for the unvaccinated,
Yeah.
in that everybody had this just raw emotion to get out. So I've done, and you've been kind enough to come to some of the events that I've run over the last few years, and maybe there's been 5 or 6 of them. But that first one, there's never been one like that one, and in that the power of it was just unexpected to me. But it was so I had stuff like that. So like the book and my journey kind of started around that time. Um, and I suppose the west of Ireland is important. And I think it's not a coincidence that there's you, me, John Waters, Ashley, and Louise, even the Irish Inquirer. Like there's an awful lot of us based in the west of Ireland. And I don't necessarily think that's a coincidence in the way I operate and kind of thinking in the world. And I think when we look at today, I think once you go east to Kinnegad, it's a different country. Like I feel like it's not Ireland. It's nothing like the Ireland or the Dublin that I know and grew up with. And I've had 2 separate periods of my life working in Dublin, and quite recent, 2000, as recently as 2015. And I don't recognize the country that's past, you know, the toll bridge in Enfield. So um, I think the West still retain, as bad as things are in a lot of the towns. Tuam, like Tuam has, any big town has had a massive population shift, but I still think the West retains more of that Irishness. And what I found through my travels, you know, mainly Clare, Mayo, Galway, Roscommon, is that, for me, the spiritual nature of the landscape, the land, the lakes, the sea, that's where I was finding, and, that's where I was able to get in touch the most with myself, as opposed to the more traditional forms of, I like, I'm raised a Catholic. I have no problem, like, I don't have any beef with Catholicism other than, the structures of the church. But like, as the religion side of it, I go to mass, and I like going into churches to pray and that kind of stuff. But I do have to say, like, most of my revelations or discoveries about myself have occurred in the landscape or on the landscape.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about we all kind of like run, running out this way. It's towards the west,
Mm,
and the names you mentioned are nearly all people like myself who grew up on the East Coast. And then there's others like Dave Cullen and Janine
Dave,
Crowley.
I didn't mention him. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Jeanne Crowley, yeah.
Janine Crowley, and they're all like from the East Coast as well. So it's like it is uncanny how, and I know a lot of people from England who've done it as well. So it's almost like we're clinging onto the side of this rock in the North Atlantic, trying to, maintain what we were. It's very unusual. I can't even go back to Dublin now. I don't even recognize it, not even just because of the demographic reasons. It's just that the whole energy is wrong. It just doesn't feel like, it just feels like, I don't know, a car park, a gigantic car park for a little or something like that in every inch of it now. And uh, so yeah, but it's encroaching on the West too. There's places like Leitrim have fallen to like that virus as well, and we have to sort of like we have to make sure it doesn't cross the Shannon. That's what I
Well,
feel.
well, I'm not
It literally
for.
stops at Carrick on Shannon on the river. It's so uncanny. It's so uncanny. There we have to make sure the mind virus doesn't, like yourself. Like I don't understand what you said about the release that happened at our first event. Like it was like, oh my God, reality has returned. I remember I was running coffee insurgency mornings on a Saturday here, and people were coming from all over the country to them. We had problems too. We were infiltrated by Antifa types and that kind of thing. But it was just
Well,
one.
you mentioned there about the state sending people out to Sweden or whatever that might have been. I'm sure that happened here, like
Oh yeah,
as what it happened. Like I remember we had it at that first event where there was two or three people that showed up to that event, and of course I didn't know what I was doing. Like the fortunate thing with a lot of things I've done is when I've done them, I haven't had a clue what I'm really doing. And as a result, I kind of wasn't too worried about stuff like that back in 2022 because I didn't know about it. But subsequently found out afterwards that, I remember a funny story on that first one was this lady, she got drunk on the Saturday night and she just turned around and she said she says, "Oh, I'm vaccinated. Just want to see what all you crazy people were doing for the weekend." So she kind of kept it under the hat for 2 days and she got drunk and it all came out like so. But it was, stuff
that's
like
all.
that.
All that stuff seems to have stopped. The last time I encountered it was at the Fermoy gig that you put on down in Cork. Do you remember when I was talking with John?
Yeah, yeah,
Said to the guy that
yeah,
was badgering us, I said, "Are you a civil servant?" Because I could fucking smell it off him. I could fucking
yeah,
smell the Department of Health off him. You know, and he
yeah,
tried, what if I am? Yeah, well, what if you? I think you threw one of the guys out actually. That was
yeah.
kind of,
I had like, yeah. I threw him out. Like I gave him a good chance, but
yeah, we all did.
stand, but he just couldn't stop. He couldn't
No,
stop interrupting. So yeah. But yeah,
yeah.
look, that's part and part. I suppose what we know now, or what we all know now, is part and parcel of what you're kind of up against when you talk in any fashion that is out of sync with the establishment. It's probably a bit less now. There's more people as well, thankfully, that are doing more, especially over the last couple of years. So, um, yeah.
Varadkar's gone. I would. That was a huge part of it. I would classify Varadkar on the level of a kind of a Bolshevik, Stalinist level. If he was in a bigger country with a military, he'd be a monster. He found himself in a smaller country. That I think the departure of Varadkar was the kind of nasty sinisterness, the viciousness kind of subsided to a fair degree. There was something I can remember in the early days when he said, "Well, you won't be able to go on holidays for a while," at a press conference, and then he said, "Well," and then he smirked, that duper's delight smirk that the psychopaths have. "You might not ever be able to go on holiday ever again," in the smirk. And I was like, I was like, that was when I was at my lowest because it was like he was actually being turned on by imprisoning us, and it was as clear as day.
There was definitely a cohort like that. Do you think he left voluntarily?
No, I don't
He-
want to speculate why. I've heard all kinds of stories, but it is pretty peculiar. They're trying to
Yeah.
rehabilitate now with a stupid biography and this kind of thing. But no, I don't think people like him don't leave for unless they can get something massive. And he didn't get anything massive. What's he like on the board of
No.
some small college in America or something? But
Yeah, he's not. I did actually a piece there early in the week, laying out where all the government ministers and health officials that were in place in 2021. It's about nine of them gone. Most of them are gone now, but they're all nearly in private sector. Like the, I've never seen anything quite like it in Irish politics, where
it's
there's been this.
Very
Yeah.
American. The revolving door thing that the Americans always complained about, we have here. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh,
But
Houlihan is an interesting one because he tried to make a comeback uh, and run for president even at one point. And the hatred he got was refreshingly beautiful, I must say. It's almost like he's one they have seen through. It's a pity they can't see through the others.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Like, I know we spend a lot of time kind of, or not we, but like a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about, um, you know, when will the country kind of wake up, this kind of thing. And I'm more and more convinced that they are actually awake. And I'll give you an example, but they're just not. I was getting the train the day after I finished the book. I got the train to Port Arlington to go visit a friend, and I was sitting down on the train, and an old lady sat beside me, and she is wearing a mask, one of the blue masks from COVID, and like 18 months ago, this would have triggered me in a sense, but um. I had a couple of books of short stories and I was reading them. One was by Lima Flaherty, book of short stories, and she just looked at it. She was about in her 70s. She says, "I didn't think they brought that. I didn't think that his short stories were brought out in paperback." And I was going, I had no idea of, the history of his short stories in print. But we had this kind of amazing conversation where she was one of these real intellectual Irish women that you would have come across a lot in my youth, who but who never went corporate or never went into professional jobs. But she was awake to an awful lot of stuff except some of the obvious, like the mask on her face. And she was even awake to the trans stuff through her granddaughter, who was in University College Galway, who she was coming back from visiting. And she could see it from the point of view that she had a granddaughter who was sharing with two other girls who were theys and who were kind of bullying her granddaughter because she was boiling potatoes and turnips for her dinner in the whatever the communal space was. So she was a very Irish girl. And it was amazing to see how this woman was trying to negotiate saying the right things while also knowing this is wrong, that's wrong. She had the dimensions of the student accommodation in Galway being smaller than a prison cell in Mountjoy. So one of these kind of intellectual women. But it was a fascinating conversation. But I thought to myself, you're very close. You're a lot more awake to the importance of the Irish things that I think are important, but you actually know a lot more about them and they get it. But there's this just it's like a thin layer of I don't know what you'd call it, but that is kind of a blinder on there being a mass kind of
The
eruption.
or the
And I
RT
don't, and I,
the
yeah,
RT
yeah.
filter, yeah, it's real. I think that's almost like, I mean, it's Christian Morris often says, if RT was destroyed, we'd save the country, and I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. And
Well, yeah, I think I wrote an article saying that RTE should be moved to old, one of the four sugar towns that were around the
well,
country.
not Tuam, that's where
Or
you
it had, well, I was doing a plug for Tuam, but but they should like if RT was in Donegal or somewhere like that, we might have a different flavor to our country.
yeah. Well, all I have to do is look at TG Cahir and see that it's a completely different world than what they are. That it's just television. That's no real deep agenda, I don't think. Yeah, I had an
No, and
experience.
that
Yeah,
yes, go
you
on.
know, that's because I had an experience on public transport too that was very sobering, similar to yours. I was coming back from Scotland and I got over to Belfast, and Belfast city centre was open. It was booming. It was thriving. It was just in the middle of the lockdown down south, and it was like normal life. And I got on the bus to go down to Dublin, and all these people from Belfast who were going to Dublin Airport were all go on their holidays, and they're all like, yeah, and they're all happy and everything. No, man. And then one woman comes on with a mask, and she's sitting in front of me, and she's pointing at people walking by without masks like this, right? And then she goes up to the driver, she had a Dublin accent, which is embarrassing enough, right? And she says, "Why did you let people on this bus without a mask?" And he goes, "Oh, we don't have that mandate on Ulster bus, TransLink. That's their bus company, TransLink." And he goes, he was very nice about it. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll just make an announcement. And he said on the bus, he said on the loudspeaker, he goes, we still have it was still people are still sensitive about masks and things like that. So if you have a mask, put it on, if you want. And the bus burst out laughing, and it was like that's the Ireland I remember. And we
And
get
that's the response that works, Thomas,
Yeah,
is
and
the
I
kind of
get out to Dublin, and it was like coming into a post-apocalyptic film. There was nobody around, and it was
yeah.
just so miserable and depressing. But yeah, I'll always remember that when they burst out laughing. I was like, and I have a feeling a lot of those fellas are probably from East Belfast. They probably would have been from the Unionist community, and they all burst out laughing. You can sometimes tell by their accent it's a bit different, and they all burst out laughing. And I was like, well, isn't it ironic that these guys are probably more Irish now than the Irish down south at this point? And I'll
Well,
always
that's
remember that.
no, it's funny because one of the stories in the book that I is kind of around that subject because I remember I went to this thing in Clonmacnoise, as you know I do from time to time, but it was actually a walk from the four provinces, and the Ulster cohort to that walk was a walk with the cross that they did these 33 miles from um, four different locations. But the Ulster cohort in I in Catholicism anyway was so much younger than the three other provinces and so much stronger. And I think that's probably the same on the unionist side up there as well, in terms of faith, but also um, the two or three times I've crossed the invisible border over the last 3 years, I've found this strange sense that I'm driving into Ireland, not out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Belfast is the ca- Belfast is the capital of Ireland now. That's
Yeah.
exactly
So
how I feel. It's the most weird thing. And places that I used to really dislike, like Enniskillen, that I used to
yeah,
like.
that's the town.
I used
Mm.
because that would be my nearest shopping town over the border, from Sligo. And we go there now and again for bargains because they have the big British chains there you didn't have in Ireland. And you go over the border, and I used to say, I can't. I just have this feeling of like this is like, it's like the old joke that like we're about to land at Belfast Airport. Put your watches back to 1690. Enniskillen Enniskillen had that feeling about it. The Union Jacks. But now I love Enniskillen. I absolutely love it. It's wonderful. And that's like, and why? Because it still feels Irish. So,
Good.
Gerry, following your articles in the last year or so, there seems to have been some kind of a resolution, kind of a resolving or something. You had trouble with your car, and you became kind of like stuck in tune and stuff like that. And it's probably what really led to the book. This is all tremendously interesting because it does it's kind of almost like a Zen moment, or well, a Zen period or stuff. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah. How would I put like I found this year of the last 4 years, I probably found this year the most difficult personally, internally, um, spiritually, and it kind of coincided with like I spent a good 6 months of the year in and out of the district courts over, traffic stuff, but weird stuff going on where I lost my license. I got a 2 year suspension on my license out of nowhere, and I only discovered it when I went to insure my car. So um, there was this fight going on. So suddenly I found myself not being able to move for most of August and half of September. And so, like anyone that would know me would know, I probably do 1,000 miles a week in my car. Like it's crazy amount of driving. I too much, and I probably had gotten too into that. As in, I'd sit in the car and I go somewhere and I might write about it. A feature of this book is Loch Nafui. So like, there's this kind of I have this kind of pre fascination with pre-Christianity and Christianity, which led to, part three of the book or two of the books called Bridget, and it's after Saint Bridget. It's kind of a running theme in my Substack is Journeys with Bridget, which is my former Peugeot 306, and um, but the reason for that is like she's one of those figures that kind of straddles both pre-Christian Ireland and Christian Ireland. And that's me. Like I have this fascination with the period of time when Christianity started to establish itself here, but also like there must have been pre-Christian Ireland straddling that period of time for a couple of 100 years, maybe longer,
Oh
where
yes.
these influences were there. And if there was one period of Irish history that I would go back to, it would be that period of time to see what actually happened, what actually happened there. And I suppose I started writing a series on my Substack called The Green Mile. It's a stretch of road that's about 100 yards from the house in Tuam. And I literally couldn't move really. So I was kind of out, and that was my inspiration point every day, just walking through this fields, stream on the right, fields on the left. And I found a great peace in after a while now. I go through this book, it wasn't all sweetness and light,
It's
but
always after a while.
yeah. But I found myself at the end of that 6 week period, I was like, and I got my license back after which I go into in the book as well. And but by the time that came, I was like, the day that court appeal came up, I was like, I don't really give. I'll I'll survive without it. Like I was from a person who couldn't live without his car. By the end of it, I was like, so what? I'll figure something out. Do you know what I mean? But I found a great peace, and I I can't reconcile certain aspects of my own internal shadow during that period. I think I did anyway. Um, so at the end of that, and I had it in my head all year to like I started writing this book in May, and I kind of threw it aside because I couldn't figure it out. But I didn't really have a book until that Green Mile period of time, which happened in the late summer of this year. And then when I went through all of my writing from like 21 to now, I went, oh, that's a part, that's a part, that's a part. And it was an action. There is a journey there. There's no, there's no crock of gold at the end of it, but it was a certain, journey, or at least I felt it has been. So I suppose, personally speaking, I think, and I hope it's been some sort of kind of system upgrade internally for what's coming ahead, because I do think, there is a lot in the outer world that is going to start coming thick and fast over the next couple of years. And I think a lot of people, we hear a lot of the talk, and I've done it myself, is like, this is a spiritual war and all this kind of stuff. But I just because you point out something as a spiritual war doesn't mean you're ready for it or that you're actually on the right side of it. you all the time. Like so, and that comes back to your own. For me, anyway, that comes back. Where am I? Am I ready for it? I would say definitely wasn't 6 months ago, 8 months ago. A bit better maybe now, but it's a constant thing, I think, for myself anyway. And um, so that's just how I feel about it. This year in particular. So it was Unvaxed Soul is, you know, that journey over the last 4 years, and I come like the end of the book. I won't go into it because it is a surprising end to it, especially for people that may buy the book and not have read my Substack. Um, um, but I think this this next couple of years, people need to be in the right place within themselves, and I see too much. That's why, like, I even think social media, like, I have to contain my digital consumption very, very, very stringently now because I can see how it affect. I'm coming to understand how it affects me, how it affects my writing, how it affects, you know, my relationships with people. So that kind of stuff, I don't think people are get given enough attention to, on a day-to-day basis. So that's just where I'd be.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, as you know, on lots of levels there. The pagan gods are there if we just acknowledge they exist. We don't have to worship them. We don't have to petition them or anything like that. Just by the sheer acknowledgement that there is a meaning to that there will actually help you. It's just something to do with natural law. I can't really explain, but it's true. The period of the rollover between pagan Ireland and Christian Ireland is still so very mysterious that we don't really know how long it lasted, how how it really happened, and what inspired these monks to. And again, like you said, it was the beginning of the Irish literary world, something that we're famous for as a people, is the written word. And the beginning of all that was these monks like the Chaldeans writing down the ancient Irish pagan mythology to make sure it was never lost. They were custodians of a past that, even though they knew that the new Roman world, the new Roman thing had finally reached Ireland. Ireland was under the Roman Empire through Christianity, or whatever Christianity was back then. And they were custodians of the pagan past and brought it into the future so it wouldn't be lost because they saw great value in it. And that's what you're talking about, I think, as well. As we shift, we're going in. The first great reset was Christianity in Europe. That's just to me is obvious. And the road through the Christianization of the Roman Empire, which reached Ireland eventually and everywhere. And the second one is now the technological one. And you're right about like limiting your engagement with it, your relationship with it, because I've had a very strange experience with ChatGPT a few months ago, where I actually believe it's sentient. I don't buy this nonsense that it's not sentient. For a long time I knew it was only a matter of time before something would happen along those lines. We don't know what consciousness really is. It's a complete mystery. So it's just as much chance it could. It doesn't matter if it's a dumb learning machine. It's still capable of retaining some kind of consciousness, considering we're using things like quantum computing and so on. Yeah, but that's interesting. You mentioned, even it brings it full circle. You remember Clonmacnoise at the beginning. You know that little chapel? I think we spoke about it once about maybe putting an event on there. There's a little chapel
Mhm.
that's not in the main area of Clonmacnoise, and
Yeah,
it's just off to it's outside the touristy area, which is still fantastic. It's still an amazing place. And
it's
you
the back door entrance to it. Yeah,
look at
do
that.
you
You
know
look at
what's
the
around that side?
artwork. Yeah, you look at the artwork that's carved into those walls, and it's all pagan, swastikas, dragons, all kinds of things like that. And that would have been the continuation of that pagan world into Christianity. So I think it's a very important. I think we're at a very pivotal point now. It's funny you mentioned that because I think a lot of us are coming to the same conclusion as well. I think that's why my audience will probably love your book for that reason, because if sort of like living a book that I wrote years ago called The Druid Code. And
Mm.
yeah, it's preparing us for the future. And I think that's what the whole scandemic was. That yeah, that's what it is. Without giving us away the end of the book or your workshop.
No, like
Tell us what
something you.
tell us
Well,
why tell us what the toolkits are to get us through. That's what I'd like to hear from you. What
the
you think.
toolkit. Well, I think that's a question that I can
Like it's
only explore with you rather than have a definitive answer with
well,
you.
I don't
But
have it either.
so, but what I would say is like there's one thing on that on the and I always use the reason I use pre-Christian as opposed to pagan when I talk about this because of all the negative labeling that goes into and around this subject. But what I think my base reason for the interest is I think there's a huge amount of lost Irish spirituality in that transfer of power between pre-Christian Ireland and Christian Ireland. And that isn't to attack Christianity or the but it's I think there's a huge wealth of Irish spirituality, and I think it's a lot of it is connected to land, water, sea, sun, all the elements. And I think that's why personally I'm kind of drawn to it. And I think there's tools there. I think those are tools to help us. I think our landscape is there to help us with tools for what's coming ahead. But you know, I think creativity, personally speaking, the people I'm drawn to, and they're from a wide background of interests and pursuits. They're all creative people. I think creativity is what gets you out of this. So when I hear whatever the latest political party that's trying to get off the ground, it's like I just switch off because politics is so far downstream from where this conversation needs to be at the moment. It needs to be about reimagining the country, and you don't need a political party to do that. You each individual can create that Ireland for themselves, and that can be a very broad conversation, include a lot of broad um, numbers and types of people. But I think that's where the conversation needs to be reset. And it's only it's creativity that gets you there. Like, um, so internally, just on my own flaws, if you like, would be to ensure that the things I do aren't playing too much into my own ego, that kind of stuff, and that I'm doing things for the correct reason. So when, we've done the two of the Dannons together and, they're never like the 1st of July every year. They're always like there's a 12-month gap or there's a 18-month gap. And the reason for that is the idea I have to, when I do something like that, I have to feel there's an actual need for that thing to be done. So when we did for Moy, I thought there was a need for that. It was the same with the Doolin event. There was a need, and I couldn't quite describe what it was till afterwards. But we'll say, like, when I look at the first one I did, it was like I write to give a voice to myself to try and figure out my own. That's how I figure myself out through words. And I think that first event was to give voice to people after 2 years of brutality. Even though I didn't consciously understand it till afterwards when I look back and I says, oh, I think maybe that's why I did it. Um, so going forward, I think that's what I think. Each person, I try like I've simple enough goals personally is to build a small community of people that will be around me and support me, and I'll support them if the shit hits the fan. So I'm fortunate, touch wood, that I have a number of those people in my life now, thanks to the last 4 years. So that would be how I'd frame it at the moment. I don't have any grand solution for the country. I think everybody needs to have this conversation with themselves first and see what the ideas are, what resonates across, big groups of people. But you can't skip the philosophical part or you know, the, you know, the hard conversations and the creative conversations. I don't need to hear, some yellow pack version of Christian conservatism coming into Ireland and we dressing it up as if it's Irish. It's not. I never heard the word conservative for 2020 in Ireland in relation to anything. And there's a number of those terms now that it's like they were always here, and I certainly don't remember them. And they don't. Again, it's that vibration thing. It just doesn't vibrate as Irish to me. Like, but that's just me.
No, I agree because if conservative Christianity, when I was growing up in Ireland, it was cults. It was like Pentecostal churches and things like that set up for junkies in Dublin, in inner city Dublin. They were not. And everyone else was Catholic or, agnostic or, some atheists and some pagans like me. But the majority of people were just sort of like laid back Catholics. Yeah, I've no time for that either. I mean, I have very good friends who are profoundly Christian and we get on great. And they don't
Mm.
have any problem with me being a pagan. I know any problem with them being a Christian. And that's the way it is. Is because I think what you said is like it's so funny you call those events the two of the Dannon. It's like now we're heading into the era of like era playing words era of on two and the heron. That it's like we're all forming tribes now. Like the
Mm.
tribe is the answer to the transhumanist AI world. I think that's definitely something that anyone who has any kind of desire to retain their human status feels that way. And the first assault at transhumanism was the needlecraft. There's no doubt about that. That was
Mm.
like that was the opening salvo of the invasion of Poland, the
Yeah.
storming of the Winter Palace, of the thing, and
Well, I just think on the two de Danann there, and I'm no expert in the two de Danann, and I think it was probably somebody that you know as well, Siofra Donovan, that um, who probably introduced me into your work originally as well, is that our mythology, like I include our mythology as being a tool for us. And there's a whole lot of spirituality wrapped up in our mythology in Ireland. And it's very, it's very rich. It's a rich mythology. And it's a living, like I consider it a living mythology. Like and stuff like that. Like if I was like reimagine Ireland, there'd be a department of mythology and you know, somebody 50 generations old would be the minister for mythology, like that kind of art. A couple of ring forts in North Galway, like, but it's I think that is all part of the living, breathing, natural environment of Ireland, and we can
oh yeah,
ignore it, or we can, or we we can pretend it isn't there. I have a short story in the book that kind of is on this train of the mythological called The Lady of Loch Derivara, and it's based on it's based on an actual story of a very interesting person that I met on my travels, but it's steeped in the mythology of Ireland. And Lake Derivara is where the Children of Lear story is based. So um, I think these things are part and parcel of who we are, not just in the past, but in the future, like,
yeah. Like I
going
find it
forward.
I find it ironic that like Eddie Lenihan, the great folklorist, his son, just wrote a book about the vandalization of Ireland, about the subjects we talk.
Is
It's
that his? Is that's funny now.
remarkable, isn't it? It's like, so there you go. It's like acts of magic almost are happening. It's like, he's probably Ireland's most famous folklorist, and his son writes a book about the things that we talk about. which is like that can't be an accident either. Like these, none of
Yeah.
these can be accidents. This is an underlying sort of uh,
Well, no, definitely
consciousness.
not.
Yeah.
And the
And
funny thing is, I spent a summer working in that's Eddie Lenihan, the Shanachie.
yeah,
I spent a summer working in Ballyvaughan when I dropped out of college for a year, and I ended up working in a hotel, Highlands Hotel in Ballyvaughan. And Eddie Lenihan was 2 nights a week in the place I worked. Um, very, very interesting character. Yeah, very. I didn't know that Owen Lenihan was his grandson, is it? Did you
I
say?
think it's a son.
Or
I
or
think
his
it's son.
son? Right, 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 right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's a remarkable story in itself that,
Yeah, yeah.
just like your story is remarkable. Before we go, I want to ask you, what was it like when you got the hard copy of the book in your hand?
Um, it was. I'll tell you what was even what was better is the when I printed it out when I printed out the proof the draft to proofread, and I had like that amount of it, and that actually kind of hit me. Now I had to do a final read of it, but that's when I felt like, oh, I've written a book. I
Yeah.
didn't think, you see, given I'm kind of ADHD, and I just the thought of writing a book was like I could never wrap my head around being able to dedicate myself to doing it. But then when I found myself doing it, I thought it was like, oh, I could actually just do this and not write a Substack. Do you know what I mean? And have a lot less kind of headaches. But um, it was great. It was like I'm glad I did it, and it was the book for me is actually the lockdowns are over for me now. In that that 4 years is shut, and we we move on to what's coming next. Now I don't know how I'm going to approach that e- exactly, but I probably will approach it much more in tune with what I produced in the book as opposed to the current affairs stuff. Where I do current affairs, even in the recent past, I've had some connection. The per Somebody close to me has been affected by what's going on and has information. So it'd be like, a friend of mine saying, "Oh, this is going on here." I'll go and take a look at it. Where there's a personal tie to the story, but I'm not sure what comes next after it, though.
You mentioned you were going to try and finance an audiobook.
Well, yeah, if I sell, like, it's done fairly well. It's only 3 or 4 days up on Amazon. Like, I would prefer not to have to be using Amazon. I've already had a number of my subscribers tell me they won't support, and I understand like the issue. But um, I've been the plan for me is to do a small book run, a hardcover book run myself if I can fund it through the paperback scales, and then do an audio because my writing is I I write my method of writing is to be spoken in your head. I'm
Yeah,
like
same.
I'm a conversational writer and kind of fragmented. Like a lot of my sentence structures are built in rhythm over 3 or 4 sentences, and
Yeah,
the grammar and the techniques of it don't always look great, but it's
you write like a diarist. I've always noticed that about your writing.
yeah.
There's a diarist quality to it.
Yeah, so it's just the funny thing is I've just found out when I looked into this there is a studio an audio studio in Tuam about 200 yards down the road. Saw Doctor, like Tuam was a big music town back in the day, so there is studio. So what I'm hoping to do is just professionally do that, kind of professionally do an audio, and that could take quite a while to do, but just to do it right, and that'll be, I think it will be easy to listen to. It should be easier to listen to. It's just a question whether I do it myself or get somebody else to do it. But I don't know yet. But that's the plan at the moment.
Cool. So tell people where they can get the book and where they can rent.
Oh yeah, so it's Unvaxed Soul. If it's UK, the two main territories would be Amazon.ie or Amazon.co.uk, whatever territory you're in. Just it's important from a delivery point of view that if you're living in the UK, that you get it from the UK, so there's no delivery charges. There's been one or two hiccups on that, and the same in Ireland. It's very simple to find. Just Unvaxed Soul, a post-pandemic spirit journey.
Well,
Subtitle.
congratulations on that,
No,
Gerry.
thanks a million,
Well
Thomas.
done. I look forward to reading it myself, and may you do more, many more strings to your bow in that regard. And I'm glad you're here, and to be a good friend and a good voice for people at this time. And I'm sure my audience will be very interested in what you had to. I mean, the conversation was so interesting. And so get out there and buy Gerry's book and support the good guys because that's what we need. We need the good guys going forward. So thanks very much, Gerry O'Neill,
No,
again.
thanks a million, Thomas, and thanks for everything, all your help, like all your support during the last 4 years and anything I've done. So I just want to put that back to you as well because it's been it's been just a joy to have you come to some of the events I've done because just the energy you bring to it and the energy that your supporters are like I just find them the most fascinating supporters that anybody has in Ireland because they're so different and varied. But I just thanks for that. And sorry I haven't seen you more this year. When I get a car back up and running, I'll be up. We'll have a coffee or a pint in the hotel.
Okay. Take care. I'll see you again. I'll be talking
Thanks,
soon. All the
thanks,
best.
Thomas. Bye, bye, bye.